For those who are posturing as peacemakers, calling for ceasefire, saying to stop the killing on both sides, saying, as you just heard from actor Wally Shawn for the news, I don't believe in revenge. I want you to hear some first-person accounts from Yossi Landau, who is a commander with the Zaka group. This is a group of first responders, volunteer paramedics, search and rescue individuals. He was on the ground after the attack the other weekend in Gaza at the hands of Hamas terrorists. He saw firsthand. He's responding, as are his people. And by the way, as you'll hear from him, his people are Jews and Arabs and Christians. There's no animus towards the Arab world writ large, but there is animus toward Hamas for all kinds of obvious reasons. But let's just remind ourselves what we're talking about in terms of the attack that was committed and the atrocities that were committed, so it doesn't get lost in all of the propagandizing and posturing. On that day,
you've been doing this for 3 decades. Did anything prepare you for what you saw 10 days ago?
No, not at all. I can't say that I'm used to disasters, because no one is used to disasters, but I went through a lot. If it's natural disasters or attacks, it's 9/11 attack, or it was in Surfside and in Miami, I was there. But something like this is the... I can't call them animals. I can't. It's a shame for the animals, but they came in and killing, just for killing and brutality, and taking pregnant women. I will say it, even though it's very hard for me. I saw it and I was there. The pregnant woman was lying on the floor. Her baby turned her over. Her stomach was butchered open. She had the baby, the infant, the unborn infant, still connected to the cord, with the cord, stabbed, and she was shot in the back.
Which was a kibbutz, which was an absolute slaughter. You said even with your experience, you reached a breaking point. Tell me about that day.
That's correct. When we went in, the first house that we went in, and we saw parents, father and mother, tied to the back, and against them there was a boy and a girl, small children, exactly against them, tied in the back. They were tortured. Father was missing an eye, was missing body parts from the children, and they were sitting in the middle. This terrorist sitting in the middle, eating the meal of this family. The holiday meal they were eating over there while torturing the children in front. Now, when you go into such a place and you use imagination, as I said, those bodies were talking to us. They was just talking to us. They explained us. They gave us the story. We saw that. It never happened to us. I went into with my group, and they broke. They said, we can't do it. I took them and I told them, with this suit, with everything, we're gonna sit now with the blood. We're gonna sit down. We're gonna sing a song. It's like we sit with a family and let's get some more courage, because we have a mission to finish.
And you did that, and you went back in.
I went back in. Then I saw much more that I can't even explain it.
Yossi Landau has a message for President Biden and the West.
If you had a moment to speak to President Biden about what should happen in response to this, what would you tell him?
I would tell him that Hamas is even worse than ISIS. It's not the Arab world. We have nothing against the Arab world. We have in our organization Arabs, Muslims, Jews, Christians, everybody. I like them, and I would say, give me a family from Gaza, and I'll take them into my house. I have no problem with that. They're suffering because of the Hamas. please let us finish our job. Please help us to let us finish our job. We can't live anymore with those terrorists. They're torturing their own people, and they're torturing even more our people.
For more on this, Seth Frantzman joins us. He's a Jerusalem-based analyst and adjunct fellow for the Foundation for Defense of Democracy, senior Middle East correspondent for the Jerusalem Post as well. And as we mentioned, he's currently driving north to the Lebanon border. Seth, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So just in terms of, your perspective on the domestic political discourse coming from those who are, to be generous, pro-Palestinian, that a ceasefire is warranted, that Israel needs to stop the killing. Your response?
Well, obviously, you can't have a ceasefire because the people that were involved in, massacring 1,400 people and kidnapping 200 of them, they haven't ceased their fire. They've already conducted the fire, and they have to be rounded up. They have to be detained or arrested or neutralized. And that's just the way it works. You can't have, for instance, a 9/11, and then the terrorists go back to Afghanistan, and you say, okay, now we cease fire. So it doesn't make any sense. And I think clearly there has to be justice, and then at the end, then there can be some sort of ceasefire when the people that did this are arrested or detained or meet their ends the way that has to happen.
And one of the other things, too, just in terms of how that justice has to be exacted, this is not, Munich, right? This is not something that can be done simply by tactical forces of zeroing in on specific Hamas leaders. They have infrastructure. We know about the underground tunnels where ostensibly a lot of hostages are being kept. They have weapons caches. I mean, this requires a conventional response, if you will, at least in the modern era, in addition to surgical response.
Yeah, I mean, Hamas runs a terrorist army and a kind of terrorist mini genocidal state. So obviously, the only way to deal with that generally is to go in there, just like you would any other group that has done something like this. I mean, as Israel's Prime Minister said, similar to the Nazis or similar to ISIS, which is also what the U.S. Secretary of Defense said. So if you're dealing with ISIS, then how did they defeat them? They went into all these cities where ISIS was, like in Mosul or Raqqa, and they eliminated them all. And that's obviously how Al Qaeda was defeated. It's how the Nazis were defeated. That's just how you have to defeat groups like that. The idea of just using a few precision strikes. I mean, how many members of Hamas crossed the border on October 7th? They estimate up to 2,900 people, obviously from different groups, and they're holding hostages. So they have to get the hostages out, and they have to go in and eliminate all the people that were involved in it.
Well, then how do you get the hostages out? I mean, President Biden said yesterday, they're working with it to get all the hostages, not just the Americans, but you have kids as young as 5 months old. You have an elderly woman who's a Holocaust survivor that they kidnapped as well. And I don't know if you saw the video that was posted with, I think Megyn Kelly posted it. There was all these Hamas terrorists holding Israeli babies and, rocking them and using them basically as human shields, but while trying to take care of them. It was a very strange dichotomy.
Well, this is obviously a huge challenge, and that's why you don't want to have hostages usually taken. So that's why Israel in the past worked very hard that would not happen. But I think in the end of the day, there has to be a way to not only to get them out, but also the international community has to come together, just like it did when the U.S. was fighting ISIS. 70 countries signed on to the anti-ISIS coalition. So clearly, the international community has to be involved in this process as well, and there's a lot to be done on that front as well. So, however it works, in the end of the day, the hostages have to come home, and the people holding them have to be taken to justice.
Yeah, and how is the international community, at least the part of it that surrounds Israel, coming together on the topic?
Well, it doesn't seem like most of the countries in the region actually have sufficiently condemned this or done a lot about it. And we actually saw how some of them, when Biden was flying here, that they, refused to meet with him, and they signed on to this kind of Hamas disinformation about this hospital being hit. So I think it has unfortunately shown that despite the peace that Israel has in the region, there's a lot more work nevertheless to be done to make sure that groups like Hamas do not have the ability to continue to fly around the region like a jet set and get a red carpet from places like whether it's Qatar or flying into Lebanon or getting support from other countries, Iran or Turkey or what have you.
How powerful is this propaganda, like the propaganda surrounding that hospital strike in Gaza that, including in the Western press, was essentially attributed to Israel? They took Hamas's word for it. So many of the outlets, like the New York Times, did initially. But now you're talking about that information spreading in countries where the state has significant control on the flow of information. And so the assertion and the propaganda gets out, and then they can substantially quell any of the truth getting out to populations that have been animated by the propaganda.
Well, it seems like this was a very smoothly run operation by Hamas, which purposely spread apparently fake number of death toll or inflated death toll, and was able to kind of operationalize not only Iranian-backed media in the region, but also this kind of Muslim Brotherhood-backed media machine as well, which radicalizes people in countries, whether it's Turkey, Jordan, Egypt, Iran, or other places, Iraq as well, Lebanon. We saw attacks on U.S. interests and U.S. consulates and things like that in the region as well. We've seen now threats to U.S. troops in Iraq and Syria. So this is a very powerful media machine. It's very important, I think, that the Western media not buy into this. We talk a lot about disinformation and misinformation, so we need to stand with our word on that. And if someone is telling you, well, there was an airstrike on a hospital and 500 people are dead, I mean, you have to go and verify that, and that's what Western media claims that it does. So it's important that they stand with their values.
What does the response to what has occurred and the response thus far since the attack, what does that say about the real impact or sticking power the Abraham Accords had? Is that all by the boards now, or is there an opportunity to continue to try to build alliances, stability in the Middle East between Israel and the Arab world after this?
There's lots of opportunities in the future. Things can change. The Abraham Accords are still there. But it just shows that you can never, ever allow or underestimate, opponents like Hamas. And even if they look to be momentarily weak or somehow restrained or deterred, that they aren't usually. So, this event on October 7th was some sort of a strategic black swan event. It was not something a lot of people thought about, I guess. And it has set in motion a whole bunch of very, very bad things, like a Pandora's box. Obviously, that all has to go back in the box. And I think then the kind of ideas of stability and all the things that we were talking about on October 6th can return, but it will take probably time to get back there.
And Hezbollah saber rattling yesterday, suggesting that if Israel doesn't stop its response, then Hezbollah will look forward to, and they do launch that anticipated ground invasion, then Hezbollah will join Hamas on the battlefield.
Well, we're sitting talking to you right now from about a mile from Hezbollah, I think, on the border. We're in Israel, and we're right next to the north. So, so far it's been a bit quiet. Every day there tends to be attacks, and Israel is obviously mobilized and prepared for that. I think that's the clear message we've seen from all the political leaders coming here, is that it's trying to show, that Iran must not operationalize Hezbollah to create a two-front conflict. But obviously, if that does happen, it will be a very serious conflict, because Hezbollah is a very well-armed terrorist group that also has impunity over the years to basically take over Lebanon. And the international community has not done enough to deal with it, just like they didn't do enough to deal with Hamas.
Now, are you concerned, and I don't know if everybody knows about this, because everybody was focused on the alleged, bombing of the hospital that was from an Israeli rocket. That was not. It was from Palestinian Islamists. But at midnight yesterday, the UN lifted its cap on Iran's ability to sell missiles to anyone it wants. Is that a concern over there in Israel?
I think it is a concern. I mean, Iran has a very powerful missile program and a drone program. The ending of the sanctions is going to allow them to kind of put some of that programs on steroids and import stuff from Russia or North Korea or China. They were probably doing some of that anyway, but it's going to allow them to do it with some pretense of legality. So obviously the sanctions on the missile and the drone programs and all this have to go back on. and there has to be monitoring to not allow them to continue to pour resources into that.
Seth Frantzman is Jerusalem-based analyst and adjunct fellow for the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. He's also senior Middle East correspondent for the Jerusalem Post. Seth Frantzman, thanks so much for joining us. Keep your head on a swivel out there.
Thank you.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
The stories you need to know to start your day. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Looking to purchase a new home? Then you need to call Team Hochberg, your trusted local lender. Saving for a down payment is one of the largest challenges borrowers face when purchasing a home. But I have amazing news. Team Hochberg has a new loan program for borrowers